Good afternoon, everyone. All right. Well, welcome to our session on housing choice. I'm Amy Diaz-Barriga. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning here at the City of Franklin. Missing middle. This is a buzzword that we've all heard lately in planning, and coincidentally, it's on the cover of the Nashville Scene this week. So it's a very hot topic. And we commonly describe this as buildings with 2 to 12 dwelling units, and it's often linked to the discussion of housing choice and housing affordability. When the City of Franklin updated our long-range plan, Envision Franklin, this year, we heard loud and clear through our public engagement process that the city needed to expand our vision of what vibrant neighborhoods mean, to include more housing choices for our citizens and our growing population. But that's the question on everybody's mind. How do you solve this puzzle of housing choice? Franklin did not want to shy away from this topic, and even though our state legislature currently forbids mandatory inclusionary housing requirements for new developments, we wanted to engage with experts and address it with policies for our future goals of the city. Through our update process, we worked with national housing expert Deborah Meyerson to research and analyze our housing stock. Here are some of the key takeaways from our deep dive. Spoiler alert, we're growing fast. We can't build housing fast enough. Our largest growing population is going to be 55 and older, and the gap between market rate housing prices and incomes is getting larger. Does that sound familiar to anybody? We used this information to address housing issues in a more direct way, and we created a new guiding principle in our plan. We found ways to address planning for housing in more supportive and inclusive ways. We added housing choice to our list of guiding principles here. These are our principles that we use to dictate how we support development that comes across our table. We created a new design concepts which promote more housing variety and more housing allowances. We identified new housing types, small-scale multifamily and farmstead residential. We saw the farmstead concept with Armistead earlier today. We added those so that we had more tools in our toolbox for the missing middle. And we also expanded allowances for more housing types in our design concepts, such as limited duplexes and new single-family developments, expanding the use of cottage courts, and encouraging more accessory dwelling units. But one of the beautiful things about Franklin is that housing choice has always been in our long-range vision for quality of life, even before the recent enhancements to our long-range plan. And the three gentlemen beside me are a testament to this. Well before the recent update to Envision Franklin, they were making their mark on the community by providing vibrant communities that help expand the housing types and options within Franklin. So I'm going to start with Derwin Jackson. He's the CEO of Franklin Housing Authority. Derwin, FHA has been working on a master redevelopment plan for their housing sites throughout the city. Can you expand on the goal of that master plan and what new exciting opportunities you've been able to create?
Okay, thank you for having us and having me today. We started, I'm always dangerous trying to use these things, but Franklin Housing Authority, I came to Franklin in 2008, and we began putting together a master plan on revamping public housing. I know that's, whenever I go anywhere in this country, I mention Franklin has public housing, people have a hard time believing we have public housing here in Franklin, but we did. We were a small housing authority, 297 units. So we started our master plan on how do we create additional affordable housing. How do we change the face of public housing here in Franklin? And so we put together a master plan that we have own about 60 acres close to downtown Franklin. So we put together a plan. How do we begin this process? And so we put the plan together in about 3 years, and then we began to the one tool that's affordable to creating public housing, affordable housing, is through the 9% tax credit program through the state, which is very competitive. But we began that process And so we have probably right now done into our 6th or 7th project with it. But the one thing we want to do is not only change public housing in the face of it, but also make sure that whatever we did, that we work with the city to make sure we blend in with the community, with the fabric, what's been built in this community, and make housing better for all the residents here in Franklin. So and I used to tell the mayor them, our goal is there should be no place in Franklin that we don't want people to go. And so all the communities should be livable, should be where people can have a safe and decent place to live. So we have through our program, the one thing that we have used, and I would say this always up front, is that what we have done, we could not have done it without the partnerships with the city and the county, who definitely help us with our projects, and they're with us and everything that we do. And they know I'm always going to come to them and ask for a lot of things. I don't always get everything I ask for, but the good thing about it, I know they're committed to affordable housing in this city, in this county. So we're at the point right now that we have created additional 300 or 400 additional housing, through the tax credit program, through other grants that we do. And part of the tax credit program, understanding that it's us acquiring the tax credits to the state, and then getting investors who will bring in the private equity to make it work. And so we're right now we have brought in close to $200 million in new development here in Franklin. The ones that we're doing right now, we just finished the 76-unit project. This is our Cherokee Place Apartments. We just finished this in September. And we've already fully occupied. Within 30 days, we had totally occupied it. This is probably about a $25 million project that probably about $16 million of that is private equity that was put into it. Other was grants, along with we have a small perm loan on it. But in part of all of this is rechanging everything that we are doing, creating more affordable housing for residents here in Franklin. And really, part of it is that a lot of people who work in Franklin can't afford to live here. So part of what we are doing, we're just a small piece of this puzzle, but we are creating affordable housing for residents who want to live here, who work here. So we're getting ready to start another 36-unit project right across from this one, which is going to be about another $15-16 million project. 36 units, and the biggest one that I've ever done is partnering with Edmonton. We're just started this project, 212 units over on Carruthers, the Wood Duck Court, which is close to about a $90 million project. We're doing that project through bonds with 4% tax credits. So through all of this, maybe another slide here. And this slide here is our senior building that we done probably a few years ago. We have two big senior units like this, 48 units for our seniors, which we know that's very important to have a place for seniors to live, and an affordable place for them to live. And we're looking at probably one final project that we own land at here in Franklin, which is probably going to bring another 120, 150 units that I plan. We're looking at doing that maybe in the next couple of years. But part of this, all of this is due to, what's affordable to us is how we make it work. It's through the tax credit program, how we make it work with the support of the city and the county. I always say that we could never do without their support fully, because no matter what project we do for affordable housing, you're going to have some gap financing. You're going to have some things that you have to make it work. And without the city and the county, and I stress that a whole lot, because I know in talking to other colleagues around the country, not every housing authority get the support that we get from our city and county here in Franklin. And without that, we could never make these deals work. And so that's part of what we continue to push. And not that it's not easy, because again, the tax credit program is very competitive. And again, for us here in Williamson County, part of that program, they look at the need. A lot of times they feel here in Williamson County, because it is Williamson County, that there's not a great need here, but it is. But that makes it harder for us. Again, it puts us way behind a lot of other counties, including in Nashville and in Memphis. We have to compete with all of them, but we have done it, and we're going to continue to try to do the best we can to provide affordable housing here in Franklin.
Thanks so much, Derwin. Thinking about our housing stock in Franklin, I'm going to move on to Ben Crenshaw. He's the Senior Vice President of Design for Southern Land Company. West Haven brought Franklin a master plan community based on the principles of new urbanism years ago, including Andres Dewani himself involved in the planning process. Ben, how has West Haven focused on housing choice in a way that makes it seamlessly weaved through the community? And what are West Haven's goals for expanding that breadth of choice as the plans work towards completion?
So, first off, we've been working at West Haven, on West Haven, for over 20 years. As you said, Andres Dewani was a part of the original planning process, and we've kept in touch with them over the years, just to kind of make sure that we get their eyes on it and help us improve our process. I want to think there are a lot of people in the room, from designers, Doug Sharp, I see him in the back, from designers to staff to aldermen, mayors. You can't do a 20-year project, and we still have 5 or 6 years to go, without a tremendous amount of support from a lot of people. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody that's been a part and has supported the project. To answer your question, we approach every project. We don't ever say, how are we going to solve the missing middle dilemma? That doesn't kind of, that question doesn't come up, but it's more of how do we start to balance out the art and the engineering of community development. The art portion of it is, how do we, and a lot of the things that Seaside Institute, CNU, the city is trying to push, Andres Dewani taught us many moons ago, all those principles, walkability, creating scale, the transect, how do you make it comfortable to move from one area of a large community to another one? How do you start to really pay attention to the pedestrian experience? How do you start to blend seamlessly? I hear the term live, work, play. None of us say, okay, I'm gonna live now. I'm gonna work now. I'm gonna play now. It's life. It's life. It's human behavior. It's how we build communities together. So for us, it's a really strong effort to say what, and Brian made the point earlier to the city, I think, that what are we trying to accomplish? Let's establish a very clear vision of what we're trying to accomplish. One of those clear visions for West Haven was the town of Pinehurst in North Carolina. And it was originally laid out as and I don't know who's a golfer here. I'm Ben Crenshaw, so you can fill in the blanks with the jokes. But their village did not have any retail in it in the original Olmsted plan. It evolved over the years to accommodate the needs of the town. And so we took a lot of inspiration from that, of how do you start to evolve a community so it doesn't look like it was designed by one person? How do you start to scale the streets so that you have a really varied experience to go from, in the transect language, you go from T3, which is almost suburban in its scale, to a T4 or a T5 where it feels much more like downtown Franklin. So there's a real art to being able to do that. And the way we approach it is, our building uses are almost agnostic to begin with. We don't say that's a residential building. So we say, how do we create that? How do we create a place that we want to be involved in? How do we create the experiences that we want to create first? And then everything comes through. So we've been building this missing middle for the better part of 15 years. And it fills this great need. So the other half of the art and the engineering is more of the engineering side, and I'm thinking of more of the financial engineering. I don't have an MBA, but I've had to sit through 20 years worth of pro forma meetings, so some things kind of seep in. Development, as you've heard, development is a risky business. It's a complex, risky business, not for the faint of heart. And typical suburban development, they will say, we have a tried and true, it's 2,500 square feet, sitting on a quarter-acre lot, whatever. You pick that number that is very easy to develop. They've built it 1,000 times and will build it hundreds of thousands more. And it's from a risk perspective, it seems a very risk-averse way to develop. However, if trends shift, then you might be left out in the cold. For us, risk management on the financial side is a broad distribution of product, and that really starts to blend that art and science or engineering, where we can start to say we're managing our risk. We can charge very competitive prices on a per square foot basis, but have multiple different product types that can be moved, can be absorbed in the parlance of development, that can be absorbed in the same year. We only develop about 100 lots a year at West Haven, and we have a very sort of prescriptive mix that is sort of tried and true for us that has about 7 or 8 product types. So for us, getting to the point of where do we weave in this more dense, a little more dense, and a little more dense product types, it's really in response to both of those things. How do we mitigate some risk, but how do we create this place that really gives people a choice of where they want to live? And I'll show you a couple of slides. The resolution might not be great for this, but every one of those little differently colored chiclets is a different product type. We have 16 different product types in West Haven. And so the distribution of those different product types is partly where that art comes in. How do you create great streetscapes? And on the tour today, we talked about having alley-loaded houses across the street from front-loaded houses. At first, we were really nervous about that. But once we started really kind of digging into the details of that relationship, it didn't scare us off. And so for us, different product types, different densities, different ways of living really blend into the community and help us build a better community. This is an aerial shot of the village area of West Haven. If you're looking at it the same way, on the left-hand side, the large footprint is the grocery store. Main Street or Front Street kind of wraps around the bow. And in this image, you can see 9 different product types, different housing choices between townhomes, 3 different types of townhomes, condominiums, stacked flat condominiums, all the way out to the single-family houses, to the front-loaded houses. And so there's this sort of seamless blending of the different product types to create those great walkable streets, those great scaled spaces that really make a community attractive. This is looking at a 3-story townhome. This is a 3-story stacked flat condo, and these are in the densities of 12 to 16, so units to the acre. Our approach to design is really everything needs to feel right from a scale perspective. So you start to see some porches, some overhangs, some great sort of scaling down mechanisms. The building in the middle is live-work. That's something that, to Doug Sharp's credit, he really pushed for in the community, which allows, and we have 2 different types now. One that is vertically oriented, where the shop owner can live above, and 2 is more horizontally oriented, where the shop and the ownership of the residential are 2 separate regimes. And so there can be much more flexibility there. But it's a great mechanism for streetscape and how do you start to blend the commercial through the residential. Townhomes, and then this is some of our alley-loaded houses. And then paying a lot of attention to streetscape, regardless of the product. And then we get into some of the larger, and we started driving around today. The easy parts of our project are done, unfortunately. The flat, easy land to build on, and now we have a lot of topography and a lot of dirt to move. And how we associate the product, the different housing types with the topography is something really challenging. And a lot of the land that's being developed in Franklin and Middle Tennessee is really difficult to develop on. We started looking about 4 years ago at independent living because multi-generational housing was not a really discussed topic 20, 25 years ago when we started West Haven. But what we've seen is that the grandparents will move in, and that they love it so much that they will bring their children and their grandchildren along with them, or it goes the other way around. We've got a great elementary school in West Haven, and so you might come with your young children, and then the grandparents come and move with you. So I went to the grocery, went to the Kroger in West Haven last night, and I saw 2 sets of grandparents pushing around their grandchild in the grocery store, which is kind of the dream for the young families. But we started really looking at independent living, and so we have a 55 and older. It just so happened to be segregated. We're not doing this in our other multifamily or our master plan communities. It just so happens to be a segregated portion of West Haven. 55 and older, we have 4 different for-sale house types: townhomes, cottages, duplexes, and typical alley load. But we have 200 apartments that really is kind of flipping the independent living model, where you go into an independent living building and you're never seen again. We're flipping that on its head and saying all of the amenities are taking some cues for what we've done in West Haven. It's where it's all about the streetscape. It's all getting people out into the public realm. We've placed all of the amenities. We have 2 restaurants, a bar, a library, indoor pool, outdoor pool. A lot of the salon, we've turned those into shop fronts. They'll be private use, but we really want to stimulate that activity in the public realm. Just because you're in 55 and older doesn't mean that you should be locked in a big building that doesn't participate in the rest of the community. So it's a really interesting experiment for us, and we should be under construction here in the next 6 to 8 months. But it's something I'd encourage everybody to really pay attention to. Is multi-generational housing is a really growing trend as our population starts to get older, that people don't want to be segregated from the rest of their community. And I told you not to let me forget about this one. We talked about West Haven. This is another project that we have going in Nashville. It's 20 acres. Just because a new development might be in the suburbs and it's really easy to do multi-scaled housing, this is 20 acres in East Nashville. It was the campus of 100-year-old. It was the Nashville Auto Diesel College, surrounded by single-family housing. We've worked to aggregate some land since then, but we're a multifamily developer. We have 20 projects going across the country. We really studied, this is going to be about 1,000 residential units. About 60-70% of those will be for lease, but about 30 to 35% will be for sale. And so from a planner's perspective, we wanted to really blend the project into the existing neighborhood, but we also really wanted to have home ownership within that project to have some people have some skin in the game for how the project is developed. And so condos, mid-rise condos, big house product, attached and detached townhomes are in that lineup. And so I don't want everybody to think that just because either greenfields or suburban development we have more land and it might be easier. Infill development is really a great opportunity for mixed density housing. And we really think from a planning perspective that it should be incorporated to be able to blend into the existing historic neighborhood. So that's a 3D view of kind of the massing of how that project is going to play out.
Those are great points.
Go backwards.
Ben, what's the name of that project? Can you tell everyone the name?
We have not. Well, we're just still
okay.
calling it. We're still calling it Lincoln Tech because that's the name of the where Nashville Auto Diesel College is.
Gotcha.
Where we have not yet come out of the ground with it yet.
Gotcha.
So
All right.
we've been planning it for going on 3 years now.
Well, thank you for sharing it with us. All right, well, I'll throw the next question out to Adam Balish. He's the development manager and partner of Boyle Investment Company. Boyle's been investing in Franklin for some time now, creating many mixed-use communities. From Berry Farms to McEwen Town Center, these communities have been building out for long enough that you've also seen them react to the housing market over the last 20 years. So how has the demand for housing choice informed your communities over the years, and how do you see the trends changing?
That's a great question, Amy, and thanks everybody for having us here today. Boyle Investment Company, I think the first part to understand and answer to that question is that we are a long-term owner of real estate. So Boyle Investment is a real estate arm of a family office, and we look to build our investments to own long-term. And I think one of the gentlemen from Seaside maybe yesterday mentioned the idea of building a community instead of a housing project. And I thought that was a really interesting caveat that was made yesterday in separating out the goals. And you can certainly have the commodity-driven product that moves through the sale of a widget, whether that's a single-family home or a townhome or something like that, compared to the true goal of creating a community or creating a place. And so in our particular instances, if we want to be the long-term owner of income-producing properties, whether that's an apartment complex or an office building or retail shopping center, we recognize that the environment that we build around those is uber critical to helping create that place and maintain that value long-term. And so what we've seen in some of these projects now that are going on 20-year mark, similar to West Haven, is the ability that we've had in the city of Franklin to modify the projects and modify the plans and work with staff and able to respond to the market, respond to change in demographics or change in trends. And so 3 of the projects that I'm going to show as an example and flip through some slides are really in a response to how do we continue to meet the market, meet the changing in housing trends, and hopefully create a better place at the end of the day. So this first project is something called McEwen Northside off the McEwen exit in Cool Springs. And this was about a 45-acre site that started out with heavy retail, a little bit of office, and some residential. And apologize for the scale of the images here, but when we took this project over, we really wanted to continue upon what has been one of the ethos of Cool Springs for some time, which is that the corporate office use. But instead of just doing corporate office like on the east side of the interstate, we really wanted to further incorporate the residential and the ground floor retail from a placemaking. And so we have now, I believe, rezoned, using the technical phrase twice, a plan in McEwen to add additional rooftops. And I think one of the things that you'll hear me say today, and some of the aldermen may throw something at me for saying this, is that we have yet to be able to probably get a project, particularly one of these mixed-use environments, as dense as we need it to in order to create the place and support the retail and support the commercial uses. And we often, as we travel to different markets and look at Serenbe's and different places, are kind of flabbergasted about some of the density that they're gaining, even in a single-family detached environment, and how walkable and active that becomes with the variety of housing types. So in McEwen Northside, we started off with several residential, kind of call it garage wrap apartments, have continued to revise that plan. And so what you'll see now and kind of the latest phases coming up are a continuation of that kind of urban wrap. We're one of the few projects in Franklin that have brought in structured parking into a residential opportunity here, and really looking at having those kind of renters by choice, if you will, that get into a mixed-use environment and can walk to the restaurants or walk to work and things of that nature. And we're excited to say later this year, at the end of the year, first of next year, we'll be bringing a site plan forward for kind of our first for sale product in Cool Springs in some time. And it'll be approximately an 8 to 10 story concrete frame condominium building with like a rooftop pool and things of that nature. And so continuing to build upon the housing variety and that housing stock in Cool Springs. So we're really excited to bring that forward. The next project is a portion of Berry Farms that some of you all may have seen earlier today in our tour. This is a project called Chadwell that was the southwest quadrant of the interstate interchange on I-65. It's approximately 160 acres, and when this project was entitled about 20 years ago, The project was entitled for about 1 million square feet of commercial, mostly office, maybe about 100,000 square feet of retail and 100 residential units. And so the large white boxes that are parallel to the interstate's running left to right on the screen is I-65, is really a repeat of a project, office park we have called Meridian in Cool Springs that is, at this age, kind of mixed use 1.0. And we're probably on mixed use like 10.0 in other parts of town. So when Chadwell was brought forward, we had already started Berry Farms Town Center across the street. And what we really began to notice is that Franklin had evolved, and we could now afford structured parking. And so if you look at this plan from 20 years ago, there's not a single deck on the entirety of the layout. And so a couple years ago, we brought a plan forward and went through a rezoning process. And you can see already out of the gate the huge change in land use and the amount of green space that this opened up. And so we had a series of public meetings where we showed pictures and images similar to some of these on the screen, and really highlighted the different types of housing. Most of the photos on the right are existing product at Berry Farms and some of our existing projects. And so when we were in these public meetings and describing to the residents that we were rezoning this project, they asked what it would look like, and we pointed to the quality and to the housing types that we had already built. And we got to one very sticky point of the presentation in each of the presentations that I gave, and I said, well, in addition to changing the layout, we want to add 1,500 residential units to the same 160 acres. And I would kind of cringe and just wait for something to be thrown at me, and nobody said anything. And we had some conversations about how to phase and bring in infrastructure, but nobody raised an eyebrow as we went through those public discussions. And really think it's a testament to some of the work that the planning department and others have done with regard to educating the community on the variety of housing types and allowing developers like ourselves to go out and execute those in a quality manner, so that when we do have an opportunity to bring a project forward for a second time or third time, we can point to other areas in town where this has been accomplished, and people's guards go down a little bit when you say, oh, you know the park that you really like across the street? Well, that's kind of what we want to repeat on, and brings people's fears to ease a little bit. So out of that 1,500 roughly units in this plan, there's not a single family house that is being proposed. And to go back to what Amy said and maybe counter to what Ben said a minute ago, I think he mentioned that they didn't enter into some of the conversation saying, hey, we want to address the missing middle. And in our particular case, we specifically went after that housing type and said, how do we go after an attached housing product that has not been built to a great extent in Franklin? So, and then the last project that I'll mention is new and is not built, and something we're calling Harlan on the south side of town. And it's an opportunity to continue to build upon some of the transformation that the planning department has helped accomplish with Envision Franklin, and in introducing what we think will be a transformative land use type in the city of Franklin, which is Village Green. It sets out 70% open space and sets aside 30% of that for development. And so for the folks that heard Mr. Nygren talk on Serenbe, those were some of the metrics that we saw and learned about in Georgia when we visited that previously and heard him speak. And so in this particular instance, there's a whole variety of housing types that I probably couldn't even get right if I tried to rattle off the allowed uses. But the key fact in that, and what I just said about the variety, is that it's capped at 12 units per building as the max. So whereas a McEwen or a Berry Farms may have some large attached multifamily as part of the housing stock, the Village Green component, although the definition in the zoning ordinance is multifamily, that is a building type, not necessarily an ownership type that goes along with a large, scary multifamily building that may have 300 units or something like that. And so in this particular case, we've been able to go back and really study some landmark projects and places, rather, to understand the density in the housing variety and housing stock. And so within this project, we will have a development footprint of around 100 acres of a 300-acre farm using that 30% development footprint. And so the image in the top left, right, whatever way you guys are looking at the black and white images is a figure ground exhibit that is meant to show, in this particular case, approximately a 75-acre site. And what you're looking at in this example is downtown Franklin. And where the buildings are shown in black is a building and a call it impervious surface on that parcel. So you'll notice our main street and the connected buildings, and then as you go off into Second and Third Avenue, where you move into single-family homes and things like that. So juxtapose that to some other nearby developments that you may be familiar with the density. So we have West Haven that Ben spoke about earlier, and Berry Farms, but also on here on the other side of that we have Leapers Fork, and you start looking at the big variety of space that is around these built environments, and how different a Berry Farms and West Haven looks compared to a Leapers, and then you start figuring out how to potentially keep that built environment spread as you integrate additional housing types. And so for that, we began to look at other projects. On the outside is a place called Palmetto Bluff in South Carolina. The middle part is one of the hamlets of Serenbe, and then on the other side is Glenwood Park in Atlanta. Similarly, we've got some other projects in the Northeast, in Vermont, Stowe, and Poundbury in the United Kingdom. And you begin to see the variety of housing types that folks have implemented and the density levels that are brought forward in those. And so we're really excited about the opportunity within Franklin as these new tools have evolved with Envision Franklin and the zoning ordinance to be able to replicate some of the most successful planning tools around the world and bring those here to Franklin. And so, some of this last slide starts showing our proposed project is in the middle. You've got West Haven on my right, whatever direction that is for y'all, and Leapers Fork on the other side. And you start seeing how a new greenfield project within a city like Franklin can be adopted and kind of fit that middle housing point and not quite be as cramped as a Berry Farms, and feel a little bit more like some of the green space that we're trying to save and celebrate here in town. So we're excited to bring projects like that forward. So thanks, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we have about 5 minutes left, Mindy, so I don't know if you wanted to offer any questions, if you wanted to pass the mic around. Do we have any questions for anybody here?
Questions?
Jump up, throw that arm up, guys.
Come on, throw it up. Throw that arm up. So, Derwin, you're one of the Housing Authority is like a large property owner in downtown Franklin because that's where you started and that's where you remain. So when you see these outlying developments, do you ever want to branch out and go out there? You don't own that land, but do you ever want to branch out there? And you just did do a project on, isn't it Wood Duck Court?
Yes, on Carruthers. We're a small housing authority, and we are our own developer. But as he said, this is not. There's a lot of risk involved, and there's a lot of the things that go into it. So we're mainly focused on really trying to develop the land that the housing authority do own. We did have this opportunity with Elmerton to go out to Carruthers, which is a great opportunity for us, and we are we're working with a couple other housing authorities in the state of Tennessee. Matter of fact, in Waverly, we are the developer for them to build 60 units there. So we are doing some other things even outside of Franklin. But inside of Franklin, that's where our main focus has been on the property that the housing authority own. And then maybe some opportunities come up elsewhere, like we're doing with Edmonton. We probably would do other things.
Yeah. And then I would just ask Adam and Ben, when you're looking, I mean, one said we're not looking for the missing middle, one said we're looking at that, but also what are you looking at as workforce as you're adding retail and where are they going to live and the people commuting in and that sort of thing. So how are you balancing that a little bit?
Yeah, and I probably should have been a little more specific when I mentioned that we specifically were targeting missing middle. And as a primary commercial developer, we want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for that more attainable and workforce housing. And I may not be using the right terms from a statistical standpoint, but we have seen a huge influx in the commuter criteria. And if Greg Gamble was still here, I think he has a statistic that speaks to the percentage of commuters that are coming into Franklin and Williamson County that don't live here, and it's astonishing. And so I think as we continue to follow the jobs, and we think that I-65 corridor is going to continue to be a mainstay in our community's job growth, and really don't see that slacking off anytime soon, we want to make sure that those rooftops are following those jobs, and that we can keep those ideally as close to those job centers as possible, to then hopefully lessen the degree of impact to our infrastructure. So
It's a complex issue, right? In Tennessee is different than a lot of states that we're working in. What we would advocate for, and we've done, oh gosh, we've done all the way down to 40% AMI for some of our projects that require it. Where we've seen it be most successful is when there are incentives, when there's a carrot versus a stick to help provide housing density. And that's where, for us, very clear requirements, requests, whatever it is to sort of satisfy that need, that's when we feel like, and we're wholeheartedly willing to comply. But where we've seen it be most successful is when there are incentives, and to be able to say, if you're able to provide more density or more diversity within your development of housing, you're willing to give a little more density. You're willing to give a little more to support that, because you guys all know development is a very difficult process and very costly. And so anytime we can incentivize for our development community and have very clear understanding of what the requests or requirements are, we'll be far more successful. And that's what we've seen in other states, from New York to Colorado, California. And we think, from just both philosophically but also creating, when Adam and I feel really the same on what we're doing, we're building communities. And communities benefit from diversity of housing, diversity of people within those communities. And so we're, from a philosophical and practical standpoint, both, we're very much on board, but where we've seen it more successful is when we really understand what the requirements are, and we're incentivized to be able to help provide that.